Good evening. I call this July 12th meeting of the Morrisville Town Council to order. Thank you to those watching via live stream and those who are watching a recording of this meeting. On July 15th, a video of this meeting will be uploaded to www.townofmorrisville.org/government/live-video. Senior Officer Strickland has 14 years of law enforcement experience, 12 years with the town of Morrisville. She has served on the crisis intervention team and has received Officer of the Year recognition several times. Thank you very much for being with us tonight as our Sergeant-at-Arms. This time I'd like to recognize Councilmember Rao for our invocation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Please bow our heads as I begin this invocation this evening. 10 years ago at BAPS in Morrisville, I heard a Swami give a very profound quote. Coming together is a beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. Tonight, we are so very grateful for the fact that our council, our staff, and engaged citizens have come together and stayed together and successfully worked together on our journey to lead one of the most innovative, diverse, and dynamic towns to live, work, and play in North Carolina. The success and growth of our All-America city demonstrates American democracy at its best, when we can come from faraway places, live up to our God-given potential, and transform our communities in the most positive way. We pray this evening that our nation, just like the town of Morrisville, can come together, can stay together, and work together to overcome the turbulence, division, hate, and fear which is spreading across our nation like a cancer. We pray for any family who has lost a loved one due to illness or gun violence. This evening, we pray for our own Morrisville family members, Greg Johnson and Vicki Scroggins Johnson, for the loss of his father, Arnie. We also pray for the loss of North Carolina community leader, Raleigh News and Observer owner Frank Daniels Jr., and for the Thala family, who just last week lost their 30-year-old son, Rohan, in Cary at the age of 30 to cardiac arrest. We pray for our soldiers wherever they may be and are grateful for their selfless sacrifices. Finally, as I end this invocation, I am reminded of the sequoia trees which we are trying to save in California. I am reminded that these trees grow miles high, although their roots are only a few inches in diameter. Experts claim that the trees grow to the greatest of heights because they grow in communities, not alone. Let us never forget that we are like the sequoia trees. All of us have come away from faraway places. We have planted our roots in this great nation. And if we can let the love and light of our hearts unite us with our neighbors and continue to strengthen our community, then there's no limit to how high we can go. No limit to our potential in the land of the free and the home of the brave, and no limits in our efforts to establish a more perfect union. Amen.
Amen. That was really good. Thank you. All who are able, please stand and join in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we adopt tonight's agenda, Town Council policy is to review and ensure there are no conflicts of interest or appearance of conflict of interest with any items on the agenda. Is there anything anyone wants to share at this time?
None.
Okay. Are there any suggested changes to tonight's agenda? I'd like to recognize Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
I'd like to make a suggestion that we remove item 14B, which is the closed session to discuss attorney-client privilege, and reschedule it for a later meeting.
I support that suggestion. I don't know. For the adoption, we need to make that adjustment.
I'll make that a motion then, please.
Okay. That motion with that adjustment. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously 6-0. There is one administrative report tonight. Some are advisory committee appointments. Administrative reports are provided as information-only items unless council has questions. Are there any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. We have 3 presentations tonight. Proclamations recognizing Teacher and Teacher Assistants of the Year for elementary schools in Morrisville, a quarterly economic development report, and a 1021 Harris Mill Road development update. So at this time, I would like, I'm going to go ahead and recognize 6 honorees, and I'm going to read 2 proclamations. And then we're going to have some people moving around the room for pictures and to say some things. So just want to let you know. But first, I did have this in the right order. I apologize. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Chris Haggerty, our District Board Representative, and Mr. Cedric Williams, Northwest Area Superintendent, along with members of our MPAC, our Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee, to stand for a moment in order to be recognized by the audience. We are thankful for the service of all of these individuals who have been actively collaborating to support students and their families in Morrisville. So thank you for that. We have 6 honorees this evening and are pleased that 2 of them are able to be in attendance with us. I will read proclamations for those in attendance, and then after I have read both, I will ask each in turn to come up to receive the proclamation and a gift from the town and take a photo with our council and Wake County school representatives. Tonight's 6 honorees are Evan Finch, Carpenter Elementary Teacher of the Year; Tim Wheeler, Carpenter Elementary Teacher Assistant of the Year; Jermaine Howell, Cedar Fork Elementary Teacher of the Year and Wake County Teacher of the Year finalist; Heba Gabar, Cedar Fork Elementary Teacher Assistant of the Year; Monica Moore, Morrisville Elementary Teacher of the Year; and Soraya Ware, Parkside Elementary Teacher of the Year. The first who is able to be with us tonight is Soraya Ware, Parkside Elementary Teacher of the Year. This is a proclamation recognizing Parkside Elementary's Teacher of the Year. Whereas the Wake County Public School System, WCPSS, recently celebrated faculty recognized by their schools as either the school's Teacher of the Year or Teacher Assistant of the Year, and honored Wake County's Teacher of the Year at a special celebration on May 11th. And whereas educating and supporting our children is one of the most important roles in the world today, both Morrisville and WCPSS have many great teachers, and determining who would be recognized at the end of a school year was a big challenge. And whereas Morrisville is committed to supporting public education as demonstrated through the establishment of the Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee in 2019, and within the Connect Morrisville Strategic Plan to promote and advocate for public education needs, and whereas the town of Morrisville is honored to have so many professional educators in our community and proudly celebrates them, now therefore the Town Council of the town of Morrisville does hereby recognize Soraya Ware as Parkside Elementary's Teacher of the Year for her outstanding accomplishments in the school and for supporting Morrisville youth. So if we could give her a hand now. But we're not coming up yet. This is where we're not coming up just yet. I just wanted to, well, there'll be lots of applauding. I wish I had a little sign, but we'll just go with it. Okay, at this time. Sorry. There we go. Okay. This proclamation is recognizing Morrisville Elementary's Teacher of the Year. Whereas the Wake County Public School System, WCPSS, recently celebrated faculty recognized by their schools as either the school's Teacher of the Year or Teacher Assistant of the Year, and honored Wake County's Teacher of the Year at a special celebration on May 11th. And whereas educating and supporting our children is one of the most important roles in the world today, both Morrisville and WCPSS have many great teachers, and determining who would be recognized at the end of the school year was a big challenge. And whereas Morrisville is committed to supporting public education as demonstrated through the establishment of the Morrisville Public Education Advisory Committee in 2019, and within the Connect Morrisville Strategic Plan to promote and advocate for public education needs, and whereas the town of Morrisville is honored to have so many professional educators in our community and proudly celebrates them, now therefore the Town Council of the town of Morrisville does hereby recognize Monica Moore as Morrisville Elementary's Teacher of the Year for her outstanding accomplishments in the school and for supporting Morrisville youth. Let's give her a hand. And at this time, if I could ask Ms. Ware, Mr. Williams, Mr. Haggerty, and the Town Council to come to the front of the stage. We're going to have a photo opportunity. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being here. Spread out a little bit. Thank you. So just want to hold that up and smile for the camera in a moment. You want to come closer? Did you get it too? You all set? Mama, did you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much. It's an honor. Parkside is such an amazing school, such strong educators, and such a family environment. And I just love it there. I told Dr. Campbell, get ready for Life of Soraya, because where she goes, there shall I be also. So when she ever leaves Parkside, here I go with her. But it was just an honor. It's been a lot to me. I had experienced a lot of things in life, and so like just for them or my peers to actually just recognize it and be proud of it was just an honor. Thank you all so much. It's very exciting.
Ms. Moore, if you'd like to come on up and bring a special guest if you wish. Thank you very much for your hard work all these years. So give you this, get a picture, and then we'll be able to say a few words and introduce your food.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Bingo more.
And if I could ask Principal Klein to come up a little closer to get his picture. This is Morrisville Elementary School Principal Ben Klein. We appreciate him being here to support you. Thank you guys. We'd love for you to say a few
Yes,
words.
thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it, and it's just so nice to be recognized by our peers. I also teach art, so it's nice to represent the arts as well. And yeah, I've been at Morrisville since my 7th year, going on 7th year at Morrisville, and 8th in the county. So I obviously like it there. I'm still there, so yeah, I love the community as well. And this is my daughter Zoe. I'm lucky enough to teach her as well at Morrisville. So it's a great school. I love being there.
Little Mustang.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Congratulations. So this time I'd like the rest of the council, if you guys can go back to your seats, I'm going to like to ask Mr. Casagrande, School Board Representative, and Mr. Pescalian, Northwest Area Superintendent. Oh, no. So this time, I'd like to publicly thank these two gentlemen for the hard work that they put in throughout the year to help Wake County be one of the premier school systems in the nation. Their efforts do not take the summer off, as you can see. They are here with us tonight. And we appreciate them joining us to support our teachers, our students, and their families. This time, Mr. Williams, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, first of all, just appreciate you honoring our teachers. I don't think we do enough for the teachers, especially in years that we've had in the last 3 years or so. It's we've asked them to pull off the almost impossible, and they've done just that. Morrisville is a friend of education, especially public schools, and I can't say enough about the mayor and the city council, men and women who are always there to support us. So we appreciate that. Last thing I'll say is for traditional county schools, school is right around the corner, but for schools like Parkside and Morrisville, we are already in. So we will continue to lean on our community for support as we do our very best to continue to make sure Wake County is one of those school systems that is sought after by others. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate this.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to share?
Thank you, Mayor Colley. There's a lot of excitement here in Morrisville about all the new schools that we have coming to town. But it's so important that we go back and we appreciate all of the wonderful schools that are already here. You have great elementary schools here in Morrisville. We're bringing great high schools and middle schools. But we need to appreciate that we couldn't have these good schools, these excellent schools, if we didn't have excellent classroom teachers and teaching assistants here as well. So this means a lot to me. I really appreciate, this wouldn't have been possible without your help, without Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, without Town Manager Page, coming together and putting these special recognitions in place for our staff. So it means so much. It sends a clear signal, I think, that this town values public schools and values public school teachers and public school teaching assistants. And I think the other side of it is that you probably value a few more if we can get them here too. So thank you so much. It means a lot. Thank you for this proclamation, and we're just happy to serve you here in Wake County Public Schools.
Great. So we'll just wrap this up real quick. Thank you both once again. Congratulations to all our honorees this evening. Thank you to our committee members, all WCPSS educators and staff, and all our families here in Morrisville. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and here in Morrisville, we are an all-America village. And we are serious about supporting education, and the next generation is the most important thing that we can do. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize, we also had some gifts for the honorees. So thank you to Erin Hudson for facilitating this entire event. So thank you, Ms. Hudson. Okay. At this time, we're going to move on to the next item. I'd like to recognize Linda Frenette, the Morrisville Chamber of Commerce President. She's going to provide our quarterly economic development report.
Thank you, Mayor and Town Council members. Well, if you looked at the spreadsheet that I included with your report, if there was one word to summarize the second quarter, it was batteries. I think with the announcement of both Toyota and VinFast in North Carolina, there has been a significant increase in a facility search for folks that manufacture as well as recycle lithium-ion batteries. But on the plus side, there were still a couple of RFIs that Morrisville was eligible for and that I was able to submit. And I think thanks to the Spark and Pathways developments that will be growing here in Morrisville, I was able to submit for those too. I'd like to give you a status of a couple of the pending projects that you might remember. Until we hear an announcement that a project has gone elsewhere, I still consider that we have an opportunity. Project Milky Way, that is the company that manufactures cell culture, media, and medical devices. As of June 28th, Morrisville was ranked second in their choice of properties. I'm not considering that a done deal. This same prospect announced that they were going to Cabarrus County back in May and then announced they were going to RTP last month. So it's not over until I hear an announcement. So fingers crossed on Milky Way. Project Janus, if you recall, that is the company that developed gene therapies to cure diseases of the central nervous system. They have not made any location decision at this time because the company decided to focus on issuing an initial public offering. So that is keeping the company busy at this time. I want to point out that not only do I continue to stay in touch with the prospects and learn updates on their search process, but also those companies that have been announced, the Chamber makes sure that we are constantly in touch with them to see how we can serve. If you were in attendance at our annual meeting, and thank you if you were, you know that we had presentations from both Science 37 and Invitae, the companies that announced in 2021, and that is due in part because we maintain those relationships. We make sure that we are here to serve the new companies. We don't stop once they make their announcement, and we're there to connect them with the business community and get them acclimated to the whole Morrisville community. This is also a great time with a little lull in the RFIs coming through to focus on retention and expansion. As we all know, during the pandemic, it was a little difficult to make some retention calls to companies, but now that it's changing and companies are welcoming us in their doors to learn about their businesses and hear about their plans for growth and expansion. The Raleigh Chamber of Commerce held their annual economic development meeting a few weeks ago, and the topic was creating a headquarters community. And while there were a lot of suggestions on how to do that, the main point that kept circling back was the fact that it tends to be homegrown. You look to your existing business base and help them grow so that they become headquarters companies. And so I will be developing a formal retention plan this summer that will focus on those mid-sized companies that have tremendous potential to grow right here in Morrisville. Speaking of homegrown, entrepreneurship is the perfect example of homegrown companies. And Launch Morrisville, I'm happy to announce, will be kicking off in August. This is a 10-week entrepreneurial coaching and training program. It is open to existing businesses, new existing businesses, or individuals that are at the ideation stage. We will accept applicants that are Morrisville residents or non-residents who want to start a business in Morrisville. I'm happy to report that as of today, we have 5 applicants for Launch Morrisville. So we're quite excited about that for our first effort at bringing Launch Morrisville, which, by the way, I just want to remind you that that is actually a program of Wake Tech. It's part of the overall Launch My City program, and this will be the first time that they're bringing it to Morrisville. If you have any questions on the report that was submitted or the spreadsheet of RFIs, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Councilmember Rao, please, and then Councilmember Rabati.
Quick thing, I just wanted to say that I think that I really commend your efforts to stay focused on the Launch Morrisville, and I think there's also an opportunity for, I see a lot of small tech companies also growing in Morrisville because the Technology Association, NC Tech, it tends to be the larger ones. So I think to the extent we can encourage anyone with innovative ideas, particularly connecting them with our smart city initiatives, I think there's a great opportunity to start companies around, just ideas that people can, so if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening today to the program, to the meeting, please do that. The second thing, just to bring your attention, the former mayor of Greenville has become the Southeast Regional Director of SBA, and I was talking to him last week, and he reminded me that there's a lot of programs that he's putting together for disadvantaged businesses, small minority businesses. So I'm hoping he can send that information and we can pass that on. And when he does come back in the area, maybe bring him back to the area to talk to the chambers. So his name's Alan Thomas, and he's the SBA Southeast Director now. So he's in charge of all of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. So, and thank you for the Engage Morrisville program, which with the NC director, that's going to be really helpful. I know the chamber's involved in that, and I want to thank the town of Morrisville for hosting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Councilmember Rabati.
Yeah, I just wanted to know the list of projects on the last page of the report. I saw that there's a couple that have submitted, and then there's a bunch that have not submitted. Can you just explain to me what the status is of projects between how they get on the list and what happens before they're submitted?
So how do we get projects?
Well, how do the projects get on the list? Like, do companies contact you and tell you what they're looking for, and you endeavor to help them? Is that what?
Got it. Sure. Typically, they are funneled at the state level, the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, and then they send those to Wake County Economic Development, and then Wake County Economic Development reaches out to all the municipalities within Wake County.
Oh, okay. All right, great. There's a lot of good projects on there.
Yes.
Lots of action, very busy. And you just let us know what else we can do to help support you as you support the town.
Thank you. We appreciate the continued support of the town of Morrisville and appreciate your confidence and opportunity to represent Morrisville.
You bet. Thank you. Moving now to item 7C, Charlie. Mark Spagnoli, Director of Engineering, will provide the 1021 Harris Mill Road Development Update. Mr. Spagnoli.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Mark Spagnoli, Director of Engineering for the record. Tonight we're going to be presenting an update on the Harris Mill property that the town owns. This is sort of a follow-up to some of the questions that you had at prior meetings regarding some park projects and a dog park that was going to be considered possibly at this property. So we figured we'd come back with a presentation and go over some of the questions that you had and then entertain any questions you may have going forward. So let's start with some background information. As you know, in July of 2020, the town purchased the 6.3 acre parcel at 1021 Harris Mill Road. Fire station is currently being developed at that property. We're occupying about 2.7 acres of the 6.3 for the fire station site. There's a neighboring property to the south of our property at 1011 Harris Mill Road that they're proposing a dance studio development. As required by the UDO, we're coordinating with our cross-access with the two developments, ours and theirs, and there's a shared driveway and some other utilities and timing of construction coordination. And hopefully all of you know that on the 27th of this month, we have our groundbreaking ceremony for the fire station, so we're in progress. For the purposes of just parcel location, just give everybody a sky map picture of what's happening here. Our parcel is outlined in red. It's a 6.3 acre parcel at 1021, and the dance studio parcel is just to the south of us, the southeast corner of our property at 1011 Harris Mill Road. So let's talk a little bit about our fire station development. As I mentioned, we're occupying about 2.7 acres of the 6.3. It's shown here in the blue shaded area, the actual site development, including the SCM, the stormwater control measure that we're proposing as part of that development. You can see the dance studio property to the south. And in purple, you can see the area where we've coordinated a shared driveway for the benefit of both parcels. And that also has some utility connections underneath as well. So to further break down our development, you've got the entire parcel at 6.3 acres, the fire station development. Shaded here in green is the perimeter or tree buffer that's required by the UDO that occupies about 1.2 acres of land. The existing pond and drainage easement, shown here in yellow, occupies just about 3/4 of an acre of land, and the remaining land area shaded in gray is about 1.7 acres. So let's look at the remaining land area that's shaded in gray. Obviously it's an irregular shape. The southern portion of it is relatively narrow sliver of land that's paralleled by the existing drainage easement, as well as surrounded by the tree buffer. The SCM that we are designing as part of the fire station development will provide some stormwater control measure for the gray shaded area in the event that we do future development there, so that some of that is taken care of. But we would still need to provide some additional stormwater control measures for a smaller portion of it if we were to develop the entire parcel. So what can we build on the remaining parcel? This is a pretty flexible zoning district. It's a neighborhood activity center. You can build office retail here up to 50 feet in height. You can build townhouses up to 35 feet in height. You can build apartments, minimum 3 stories, up to 50 feet in height. You can build a municipal building. You could do parks, dog park, could be basketball courts. There's a lot of different opportunities. It's a relatively flexible zoning district. As I mentioned earlier, an additional SCM would be required to cover the remaining impervious area. And we would also have to take into consideration that the existing drainage easement was meant to provide for all 3 parcels here, the one to the north of us, our property, and to the dance studio property. There's a property owners association. So there could be a drainage connection that crosses through our property at some point if the dance studio property was developed. And we'll get into details about that in a minute. So let's review the existing pond and our proposed pond for the fire station. I think the question here that came up was, why do we have 2 ponds? Why is there an existing pond? And why are we proposing a pond as part of our fire station development? So to get into some of those details, the existing pond that is on the property, or portion of it's on our property as well as to the property to the north, doesn't meet the current nutrient rules required by the state. So It's really just a detention pond. It doesn't have any of the mechanisms to do nutrient regulation and so forth. So during the design process, we determined that it would be less expensive and the least construction disturbance if we just propose an additional stormwater control measure as part of the fire station development. And ultimately, we've sized that stormwater control measure to take on additional development as we consider what we do in the vacant parcel. So we did consider that in the design, and it would cover about 80% of that parcel. We could cover it. So if we only developed about 80% of that parcel, we wouldn't have to do an additional SCM. It would be covered part of the fire station pond that's being proposed. Basically, when you look at the two versus reconstructing the existing pond, it was a lot less expensive, a lot less intrusive. So we have an adjacent development being proposed. It's at 1011 Harris Mill, as I mentioned, the dance studio development. They have submitted plans to us starting back in 2021. We've been coordinating with them on the shared driveway that you see highlighted here in purple. The original submittal for the dance studio did propose an SCM or a stormwater control measure on their property with a storm drain pipe that bisects our property shown here in green. They would have an easement that would allow them to tie into the existing drainage easement that's highlighted here in yellow. That easement is part of, like I said earlier, a property owners association that encompasses several parcels, and it allows pretty much everybody to connect to it for discharging stormwater. So as the dance studio and fire station properties further developed, concepts were discussed about a possible shared stormwater control measure pond, and that's the third pond you see here in green. The town needed additional fill material for our fire station development, so the fire station parcel will require some fill so we can elevate the parcel a little bit to accommodate the new building pad. So we were looking for some fill material. The SCM would also pick up any additional development. We could use that third pond to take care of any additional development needs from an SCM perspective. And obviously, we would benefit from the shared cost of the driveway and water main and other utilities that are being proposed within the purple shaded area of the map here. So just like summarizing or going back to our parcel breakdown, if we include the additional pond in this development, we're losing about 3/4 of an acre of our vacant parcel, meaning that it would be just under an acre left over as vacant land. And if we go back again to what can be developed here, obviously the zoning would remain the same, so we would be able to develop the same type of uses with a smaller size parcel of land that we could build on. So what benefits do we gain from the dance studio development? Ultimately, the dance studio would cover their cost of the shared driveway, which has a value of about $140,000. The fill material that we could get from the excavation of that pond that we could use on our parcel gives us another credit of about $45,000. And the third pond acts as a remaining SCM improvement for our development or our vacant land, and that has a value of about $50,000. So it gives you a total estimated savings to the town of about $235,000. The last two items, even though they're listed here as benefits, they're not necessarily benefits, but we do talk about the fact that we would lose about 3/4 of an acre of land and some development opportunity together with that. So our primary question for council this evening is whether or not staff should negotiate an agreement with the dance studio property owner for the use of our property as a shared pond. And I'm open to any questions and comments as well.
Okay, I'll recognize Councilmember Rabati, followed by myself, please.
With the shared pond for the dance studio, it looks like the area where they want to put the pond that's not an attractive area for development anyway, right?
Yeah, it has some restrictions. The grading isn't great there, as well as the fact that it's relatively narrow at that location.
So if we ended up with 0.95 acres, let's just say that we decided to go with basketball courts. I'm having trouble. Spatial relations aren't really my thing. How many basketball courts is 0.95 acres?
We actually had a little sketch where we placed basketball courts on the parcel, and it's complicated because it's so irregular, you know, and basketball courts are obviously rectangular. So I want to say that you can get, if my mind doesn't escape me, 3 to 4 courts on that portion, and then if you could probably put another couple courts in the skinnier portion if we didn't do that pond there.
And what if so $235,000 in savings, would that be enough to put some basketball courts on there? How much do basketball courts generally cost us?
I couldn't give you that answer just on the fly, but they're going to be more than $235,000 for 4 or 5 courts.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So I'd be interested, before you go forward and give direction, to actually see those sketches and see what would happen. What would the balance be between us maximizing our property and the stormwater needs for those items?
Okay.
Because at this point, it seems like if we do the stormwater pond for them, and then we try to build more things, we can't build as much because we're going to have to enlarge the pond.
Right.
So I'd like to put Morrisville first in this item, and basketball courts seem non-pervious, so they would be the most intense use. So if you could find out how many would go on there, we'd probably also need a bathroom and lighting in order to make this really a destination for basketball, or it could end up being some other sport. But we have very little land, so we need to maximize everything we've got, and I think it'd be a little premature to go ahead and give up any of it until we really know what we're getting into. So those are my thoughts on this issue, and I'd love to hear from more of the council. Councilmember Fender?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the option of putting basketball courts in this area. Do you know if the 3 to 4 basketball courts included space for a parking lot?
I think the quick sketch we did was just showing how many courts could fit within the irregular shaped property. You know, I'm sure we could develop a site plan that obviously had parking to accommodate the use.
Did it reduce the number of basketball courts?
Sure.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay. Councilmember Rao, please.
I share the mayor's concern that I think that I like the idea of a stormwater pond, but my preference would be an option that would enable us to do more, which would be more basketball courts. Of course, I wouldn't mind 2 tennis courts either, but we've heard, or 3, but we've heard there's a real need for basketball courts. So I would really ask us to look at that. I mean, that would be my first preference, is to look at what option would give us the most use of the land to provide amenities to our residents, and not throw out the idea of tennis courts.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
So my thoughts on this haven't changed from the first time we talked about it. We need to maximize our property for our use, so I haven't changed. But Mark, if not for the pond, are there other options? I mean, you showed like a pipe and all. Are there other options besides actually doing 2 ponds out there on this property?
There are a lot of other options. It doesn't always have to be a pond. There are other stormwater control measure options that can be used. Even if there was no pond from the dance studio and we were going to do something, we don't have to do a pond. The pond, we see it also has some, I want to say buffer benefit, because the parcel to the south, and maybe I can go back up. I don't think I showed it, but the parcel to the south is a daycare, so it provides like a little additional buffer and safety separation from that use. And at one point, when we were thinking about the dog park, we thought that the pond could be a nice, landscape architectural backdrop, because you're out with the dogs and you can sit by the pond, and so it had some aesthetic benefit besides for just trying to make it all work money-wise and so forth. But there are other options besides the pond. It doesn't have to be only a pond.
And is it a good assumption then that the other options are going to be even more expensive? Is this kind of the least expensive type of an option?
This is the least expensive likely for the dance studio, because they would be paying the cost of the construction of this pond. We would not be contributing any money to the cost of the construction of the pond. Some of the other stormwater control measures, like a sand floor or something underneath the ground, that doesn't have any visual or surface obstruction are more expensive.
Okay. And if we move forward with some kind of agreement with this other property owner and do, a shared pond or something, what happens to maintenance of that pond?
So if we don't ever use it for our benefit, we don't have any cost implication for maintenance. When we do decide that we're going to develop something that may need to use it, then we would pick up that percentage of maintenance of whatever our contribution would be.
Okay, and you're talking about if we use the rest of the property?
Right.
The undeveloped portion right now, if we choose to put the basketball courts on it or whatever.
And that's only if we would need it, because like I mentioned, the pond that we're proposing as part of the fire station development does cover a good portion of this yellow area. So it would only be absolutely if we need it. So we may never have any maintenance costs. It depends on how much impervious we do. Like, we did all basketball courts, we would likely need to connect some of our stormwater runoff to their pond, if that's the way we went.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you for giving us the update anyhow.
Thank you. It appears that everyone who wanted to make a comment in the first round has, so I'll circle back to Councilmember Rabati, please.
Is there some kind of requirement that the stormwater control measure be contained within the boundaries of one property? Like, could we turn this 90 degrees and put it partly on our property and partly on theirs?
So that's a great question. We're actually working through that because initially the concepts that we were throwing out was exactly that. We thought it could be sort of half and half. And then we've been kind of, and I'm not the best to answer this because I'm not as intimately familiar with some of the planning rules in the UDO with tree buffers and stuff, but we're trying to work out, could we do that? That way we could occupy less space on our property. So we're working through that as well. We kind of wanted to get a feel from the council first because we spend too much time from our side and their side, and then the council's like, absolutely not, we don't want to have anything to do with this, and it's time not well spent.
And another thought that I had was, is there, if we allow some of the stormwater control measure to be on our property, could we maybe share their parking lot and not do, not clutter up our small usable space there with a parking lot? Maybe that's an option.
I can't answer that, but I will. I like the idea, so
Just
I
a
will.
thought,
Yeah, I really appreciate the fact that parking was brought up, because when we just focus on the basketball courts, we forget about the other things. And like I said, a restroom would probably be important. Early in your presentation, you said the addition of the second stormwater pond just kind of made sense. But if we come at it from the perspective that land is so valuable that maybe it might be worthwhile to actually augment the current existing, even though that's costly, it saves us some land and there might open up some more uses in the future. So if that's another alternative and option that you guys can just give us a choice about, whether or not what would be the cost of that small second pond or augmenting the existing, that would be helpful to make a better decision for us. So would it be correct that next steps would be you guys will sharpen your pencils and give us another presentation like this, but I'll recognize Councilmember Fender first.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, if the dance studio were to do their own stormwater pond, it would be on their property, right?
Yeah, so their original development proposal did have a stormwater control measure on their property. It was a different type of system. It wasn't a pond. So what happened was along the process of us coordinating with each other, things started to evolve into some potential other options.
Okay, and then my next question is the stormwater control measure that you say is existing, is that the one that's right beside Fujifilm?
Yes, so it's the yellow strip, and then towards the top of the page here is the lake, the pond.
Okay.
And it's a lot larger beyond our property.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at Google Maps, of course, the satellite view, just to get perspective on this area.
Yeah.
So is that land owned by Fujifilm?
No, I don't recall who the property owner is, if it's them or if they're leasing the property. I don't recall from memory.
Okay, because I kind of like the mayor's idea of, is it feasible to make upgrades to that existing pond to meet whatever requirements would be helpful. So I don't know if that's an option or not.
It is feasible, and we had looked at it. What comes into play besides for the cost is that we would have to reconstruct the entire pond, and a lot of it's not on our property. So there would be a lot of coordination with the neighboring property owner, besides for the cost being elevated. So we can circle back when we come back, and we'll bring more details about that, so we can provide that information.
Okay, one last question. That drainage that goes down between the stormwater pond and McCrimmon, is that all underground?
It's underground.
Okay, thank you.
Because we've already gone forward with the agreement about the road. They're working with them, right? So that's not really a negotiating point anymore.
With Fuji, yes, that agreement's already been approved by the council.
Okay, excellent. Some good collaborative partnerships going on in that area. We really appreciate you guys bringing those forth to us.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, seeing none, have any kind of time frame when we might see another presentation like this with more options? Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay, you just let us know.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you for tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This time, we're moving to item 8, public address. Town Clerk Smith will now present any public comments received and recognize anyone in the chamber who signed up.
Yes, sir. There was one public comment received. This comment was submitted on behalf of the Public Education Advisory Committee, informing council that as of July 16th, 2022, those experiencing a behavioral health crisis, including suicidal ideation, will dial the number 988 instead of 911. That was all of the received comments via email, and this comment was provided to council in its entirety and will be included in the public record. And there was no one signed up for in-person public comment.
Okay. Is there anyone in the room who would like to make a comment for up to 3 minutes on any subject of your choosing? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 9. There is one public hearing item on tonight's agenda, a development agreement for the construction of a portion of International Drive. Chris Lawson, Planning Manager, will facilitate the item. Mr. Lawson.
All right, good evening, Council. To follow up on the last meeting in which I briefed you on this item, tonight is a public hearing. I can answer any questions you still have about this item. Just following up on the last meeting, it was determined that there were no other alternative arrangements that could be made. Staff still do not know the final cost to the town for the environmental permitting and mitigation. Planning and engineering staff are continuing to monitor that and hopefully know something soon. Besides that, I have no other updates, and then action was scheduled tonight, but I can take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Lawson? Okay, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close. Was there anyone signed up for public hearing, sir? No, sir. Anyone here in the room for this public hearing? I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion. Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously 6-0. Anyone have any questions before I entertain a motion? Okay, is there a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2022-168-0?
Do you want us to read the whole thing, Chris? Or
Yes, please.
okay. I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2022-168-0 of the Morrisville Town Council authorizing a development agreement with Spark Infrastructure Property Owner LP for the construction of a portion of International Drive.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Mayor, if I could
Yes, sir.
say one thing,
Yes, please.
I missed adding a little phrase we'd like to add to these adopting resolutions. The last paragraph that says be it resolved we adopt the agreement. We've been typically adding a sentence to say the town manager and town attorney are authorized to make technical and clarifying changes in the agreement. Because particularly with one this long, there's always some exhibit that needs to be tweaked or changed. So if you would consider adding that sentence in the now therefore paragraph, town manager and town attorney are authorized to make technical and clarifying changes to the agreement.
would it be acceptable for Mayor Protem to amend her motion as stated and not?
I amend my motion as stated by the attorney.
And I second that amendment.
Okay. I have a motion and amendment amended. Is it proper to take a vote at this time, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously as amended, 6-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Lawson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Town Attorney Gray. There is one action item on tonight's agenda, a resolution authorizing Phase 1 design build for the southern lot. Mark Spagnoli, Director of Engineering, will facilitate this item. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I'm used to having them on consent, so I have to say something this evening. So, good evening again. This item is a contract award for the design phase of the design build project for Church Street Southern Lot. It's to Muter Construction in an amount not to exceed of $200,000. The scope of work includes a new parking lot, 6 cricket practice pitches, a picnic shelter with restroom, a basketball court, a volleyball court, and a multi-sport court. The capital project budget ordinance was approved in November of 2021 with funds allocated for this phase of the work. So, I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know, am I supposed to read the resolution? I'm sorry, I don't usually have to do this as an action item.
Just to clarify, you mentioned one each of those items, but there was a possibility of more than one volleyball court. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're
just limiting us by saying that there's only one.
So the besides for the practice pitches, the other courts are in flux. We're trying to decide which court's best, but there'll be basketball, 3 additional courts besides for the practice pitches. The exact courts haven't been designed yet. This is where we're going to get into that now with this
Okay,
process.
and that's due to space constraints?
Yes.
For the most part?
That's correct.
They're about the same size each? Okay. Looking to see if anyone has any questions or comments on this item?
So just a comment, that information will come back to us.
Absolutely, yes.
When we get through this design phase.
That's correct.
Okay. So is there a motion second to adopt Resolution 2022-2667-0?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries 6-0 unanimously. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Spagnoli. Okay. A little early for our break, but we can take it early if you want, or do you want to go through one more item, looking for the council for how we're feeling?
Let's try to get through one more item and then
Okay.
take a break. Next one's
That
going
sounds
to be
good.
big.
The tree one.
We are at item 11, new items. There are 2 new items on tonight's agenda related to proposed UDO text amendments. Elliot Ward, Planning Manager, and Caleb Allred, Planning 2, Transportation, will facilitate the first item.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. As the Mayor stated, we'll be both presenting on this item. So if you don't mind, we'll just present all the way through, and then if you have questions for either one of us, we'll answer them at the end. All right. So I will be presenting on some proposed text amendments to principal uses and signage. Specifically, the staff is proposing amendments to the principal use table. This to permit elementary, middle, and high school uses in the office institutional zoning district. This is primarily related to the high school proposed, obviously, next to Wake Tech campus. And it'll help save Wake County Public Schools some time in the end. Also, Section 5.16, staff is proposing the following language. For sites 25 acres or greater in area, or with 400,000 square feet or greater of floor area, an applicant shall have the option to submit a master sign plan to be reviewed in accordance with Section 2.5.5 of this ordinance. For each sign within a master sign plan application, the applicant must submit a sign permit application to be reviewed for conformance with Section 2.5.12 of this ordinance. This is primarily after staff met with Wake Tech, recognizing that some of our sign code language doesn't really work for larger sites. As you see, we chose 25 acres or larger. Essentially, it doesn't quite take into account the needs of some of these larger sites. Wake Tech, for instance, has some safety signage, some directional signage, and they're going to need kind of their own plan. So looking at adjacent municipalities, we recognize there is language in a lot of other municipalities. We chose 25 acres or greater and 400,000 square feet or greater by looking at some of those municipalities as well as some of our own sites, and just kind of took an average there. So that's where those numbers came from. And then corresponding with that, we're proposing a procedural language to Table 2.3. This is just outlining the review procedure for master sign plan. It would be very similar to the rezoning process, where staff would review, the planning director would offer a recommendation to PZB, who would then in turn recommend to you all for action. Sorry. And then finally, staff is also proposing an amendment to section 3.7.3 related to the Main Street Plan Development District to allow signage in the district to be reviewed and approved as part of that plan development plan and agreement. This was just recognized by staff as previously it stated that it could not be modified in any way, the signage for in this district. We wanted to make it correspond with the mixed-use plan development, which does allow for signage to be amended through the PD agreement, like other sections as well. So that's where that came from. I'll pass it over to Caleb.
Thank you, Elliot. Mayor, Council, good evening. Caleb Allred, Planner 2, Transportation. I'm going to talk about Section 5.8, 9.7, and 9.8, and some proposed text amendments for those sections. Can everybody hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Cool. So we're going to, first I'll go over some background of these sections, and then we'll talk about the proposed changes by staff. So UDO Section 5.8, Access and Circulation, does several things. It regulates pedestrian and vehicular site design. That's internal to each development site. It also kind of gives teeth to the comprehensive transportation plan and requires developments to improve or to construct anything identified in the CTP that is on their site or touching their site. So think road improvements along their site frontage, greenways along, throughout their site, things like that. It also sets standards for transportation impact analyses, TIAs. Section 9.7, non-conforming site features. It describes the circumstances in which non-conforming sites are to comply and bring their site up to current UDO standards. So of course, a UDO is amended or a new UDO is adopted. Obviously, there are going to be changes that come about that can kick existing sites into non-compliance. So this kind of gives the standards and the regulation around when they need to come up to compliance. Section 9.7 is applicable to a lot of development sections in the UDO, but it's actually not, it does not point to Section 5.8 as one of those, one of those sections that needs to come, you need to come into compliance with. That would actually be Section 9.8, which is interestingly a very similar, if not identical, section to 9.7. It just specifically says it is for access and circulation features found in 5.8. So some proposed amendments for Section 5.8, pointing to Section 9.7 to say, hey, when you meet these thresholds, you need to come into compliance with Section 5.8, just making that very clear in Section 5.8. This will create consistently throughout the UDO. Like I said before, there are other sections that already do this, so we're just trying to bring Section 5.8 up and with the rest of those. Our staff are also proposing to remove language waiving cross-access requirements if provided by a local street. So this has created a little confusion with the development community. There are two standards, or two situations in which you would build streets using air quotes. So if you are, if the use is single-family residential or a single-family attached, which would be like townhomes or duplexes, each of those units has to be fronting a public street. And so the town requires, through a development, that those local streets go throughout to attach all of those houses to the local streets, and that they are to stub those local streets to the property line. So that's the requirement for those uses. For other uses, which might have driveways going to parking lots or things like that, they are also required to stub their driveways to their property lines and that's defined as a driveway. So similar requirements, when you're out in the community, you'll see them as similarly, but the requirements are going to look different depending on the uses. Currently, if you and the way that the UDO is interpreted, if you are extending those public streets to the property line, you do not have to extend driveways because you're already in effect doing that by extending the public street. And removing this language will just clarify that to the development community. And of course, there are going to be grammatical updates for clarity throughout these due to just text changes in general. For section 9.7, and I apologize, I left this part out, but for section 9.7, we're just pointing back where staff is proposing to add language just to point back to section 5.8 to make it clear that this is applicable to you. And then in addition, staff is recommending to just remove section 9.8 in its entirety from the UDO.
So as part of the PZB's review, this is just simply stating that they recommended to remove the wording section 5.16 from the proposed language here. Originally, staff had included at the bottom, the applicant must submit a signed permit application reviewed for conformance with section 2.5.12 and section 5.16. PZB recommended removing that as it kind of is counterintuitive to what we were trying to accomplish. That's specifically the signage section 5.16. And if there are specific unusual circumstances like with Wake Tech or other larger sites, they may not necessarily conform with the current sign code and would need to be amended through their own master sign plan. So that's where that came from. Staff recommends approval of these proposed UDO text amendments as recommended by the PZB in order to allow more flexibility for developers, as mentioned, and property owners, while also providing more clarification within the UDO moving forward. Potential options for council are approve the proposed UDO text amendments, approve them with changes, or deny the proposed UDO text amendments. And then staff will, or council, next meeting there will be a public hearing. Council then would then be acting on this ordinance here, either following the public hearing or at the following meeting as slated. And that is all we have for you. If you have any questions for either one of us.
I have one quick question for Mr. Allred. If we go back to slide 8, please. You were mentioning during your narrative about how we require developments to construct along their frontage.
Correct.
In the past, we've run into it where they only have to build half a road. Are we able to require that they build the entire amenity?
So I unfortunately cannot speak to if we can require it, but in the past, the road widening that has been required is limited to their half of the ultimate cross section along their frontage. So you would take the cross section, split it in half, and they have to do their side, and the folks cross street, if they developed, would have to do their side as well. But we can certainly look into whether or not we can require the full road to be widened.
Yeah, because we found that having, better to have it done rather than leave it hanging out. So if that's within our authority, I'd be interested in knowing if the council would be interested in requiring that going forward.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Fender?
Yeah, my question is with regards to this slide as well. Do you have, similarly to how the text amendments to the UDO for tree preservation, they have an attachment that includes like a red line of how the UDO will be updated? Do you have an example of that for this 5.8?
I could certainly provide that for you.
Because I don't have a good picture of what this looks like and
Right.
what the impact is going to be
Absolutely.
for the cross-access.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly provide that for you. I think it,
Was the question just about the red line?
right.
Yeah, that should be in attachment 2, if I recall it correctly, with the packet itself. All the red lines.
For it.
We can upload that, correct?
It's on page 99 of our packet.
Oh, okay. None of these links seem to go there.
Thank you.
Is it possible to bring it up, page 99 of the packet, and then we can speak towards it? Please?
Attachment 1, sorry.
That's of the whole, page 99 of the whole packet. But
Ordinance, sorry.
Oh, okay.
If you keep going down. Oh, thanks. Master sign. Is this the whole? Oh, there we go. So the redlining in this section is, like mentioned before, pointing to section 9.7, saying, hey, if you're a non-conforming site, please look at section 9.7 for those thresholds for requiring you to be have to come into compliance with section 5.8. And this is where we're talking about the where the UDO describes the cross-access and the and that local street provided by a local street. So like I said, the intent of what's crossed out here, it was basically to if you were extending that public street to the property line, it seems a little redundant to have you also have cross-access to that property line. It serves that purpose anyway. And so it was interpreted that way by staff, but of course it was a little confusing for developers. So staff have proposed to remove that language in there saying, hey, you don't have to do it. It will still in function. That would still happen. It would the UDO kind of sets up everything so that if you do provide public street continuation, you don't have to provide cross-access. But this is just to remove that one line, because a lot of folks, what would happen is they would have questions if they were just fronting a local street, and they would say, hey, I'm fronting a local street. Do I have to provide cross-access? So this is just to clarify those things.
All right.
I believe that's it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Not seeing any other questions, but you mentioned the 26th. We'll have a public hearing on this. And then perhaps action, it's listed on the 9th, but you're indicating that if there's no issues, the council will have the option to go ahead and take action that night. So if we want to make sure that future agendas indicate that we might actually be taking action that night, that'd be helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else for us, sir?
That's it.
Sirs? Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good presentation. At this time, it's 7:10. We're scheduled to take a break of 15 minutes in duration, so if we could be back at 7:25, that would be great. Thank you very much. We're adjourned until 7:25. Okay, we're back in session. I now turn it over to Chris Lawson, the planning manager, who's going to facilitate our next item.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so good evening again, Council. Tonight, I'm going to brief Council on some proposed amendments to UDO involving tree preservation, common open space, perimeter buffers, and landscaping. I'll just say, a lot of time, thought, and effort has gone into these. I'm very excited to present them and see what Council thinks and what improvements we can make. So, oops. Okay, so staff has scheduled 3 meetings for Council to review. Of course, Council can take as many meetings as you'd like to review these. With that said, though, I do want to note that any development plans submitted prior to the adoption of these amendments do not have to follow the new amendments. They're able to stay grandfathered into the current UDO. And I point that out just to say that once they're adopted, you will not see immediate changes around town. It'll take some time as plans go through a very long review process before they start building. So just want to point that out before I get started. The presentation is broken into 4 sections, each covering each section of the UDO that's being proposed to be amended. The text itself is attached to the ordinance within Peak. I can bring that up anytime if you need to look at it. Draft Planning and Zoning Board minutes are also included, and then the Environment and Stormwater Committee also included a memo, and that is also included as a Peak attachment for your review. I just pointed this out in a previous slide, but again, at any time the town has 20 to 30 site plans under review, those that are already submitted, again, will not have to comply with these standards, but anything that is submitted after council adopts amendments will have to comply. And I want to point out that this is not something the council has control over the town. This is just a state standard that we can't go back and make someone comply with a new law with a development. So. I presented the next few slides to council before, but again, just want to retouch on the public outreach that was conducted, various surveys, outreach, a meeting with the development community, and then just posting these amendments online, having folks email in, and other forms of outreach. And then the last slide before we jump into the amendments themselves, I just want to again review the local legislative authority that the town has. So in North Carolina, the legal structure is that towns are granted basically all of their authority by the state. So the state government could, if desired, expand or reduce any power granted to the town. Again, just want to point out that in recent years, the General Assembly has at least reviewed or discussed legislation that could have reduced the town's ability to regulate tree preservation. So that is my summary. So let's jump into the amendments themselves, starting with tree preservation. This is the most significant changes of the 4 sections, the most detailed. There are some fairly major changes that I think will stand out, but I'll also note there are some amendments which may seem small, but staff believe they'll have pretty significant impact on the amount of trees saved, or at least the quality or quantity of trees preserved. A lot of these amendments came from as staff was thinking about ways to tweak the language, reviewing plans that were under review, looking at old plans that were approved, trying to understand how certain trees were saved, certain trees were not saved. So the first proposal I wanted to talk about is the just flat percentage of trees that are required to be saved. So currently, there's a sliding scale. The amount of trees that have to be preserved is based on the amount of existing tree canopy. Staff is proposing that the town just go with a simple, straightforward 15% for non-residential sites and 20% for residential sites. Essentially, this would allow every single plan that is submitted to be clear and straightforward as to what the requirements are, and then the numbers are actually a little higher than what it would be currently. So there's another attachment. I think it's attachment 2 or I think it's 3. Basically, I took the numbers that are proposed here, 15 and 20%, reviewed old plans, compared the current UDO standards with the proposed standards, and every single site was required to save additional tree canopy based on the results. So I think I kind of said that in a long way. Essentially, the new requirements that are proposed here before you will require a greater amount of tree canopy preserved than the current standards. I also want to point out that currently the UDO is broken down between non-residential and mixed-use developments, and then residential developments requiring more tree canopy. The Planning and Zoning Board discussed combining these numbers into one flat number across the board. They ultimately did not recommend to go with that, but I figured it was worth to point out that there was discussion about having one single number instead of dividing it between the 2 uses. So the next few slides, I've just got examples of what the 15 and 20% will look like and some of the other changes that are proposed. I've listed some caveats here in the sub-bullet points. And all I mean by these are that I've drawn boxes on aerial images. There's a lot more thought that goes into actually designing a site. This is just for reference. So we'll start with a non-residential site. What's proposed tonight would be required to save 15% of the tree canopy on the site. This is 401 Southport. On your screen, you can see the top road is Southport, and then the one running on the right side of the screen is International Drive. And again, these are just a few different examples of potential options. So left to right, it's 15% tree canopy up to 25%. Again, staff is proposing 15%. And I'll just keep moving along unless there's any questions or comments or any other reason to stop. So to compare this site, the town does have a plan and review for this site, and I'm going to jump to the next slide and show it. I've highlighted the areas in green which this plan initially proposes tree canopy preservation. It's an early version of this plan. It's not approved yet, it's getting tweaked. But just kind of wanted to give council an example of what does staff see generally when a plan is first proposed. So if you think about the town's development review process, developer comes in, they have a pre-submittal meeting first, which is just a sketch plan of kind of what they want to do. Staff will go over all the requirements, and then they'll submit an actual plan. And this is just an example of one. So next is a residential parcel. So currently, staff is proposing that a residential parcel, except for single-family detached homes, which the town's not allowed to regulate, would have to save 20% of a site as tree canopy. So I picked this example for a few reasons. The first thing to point out is it's a lot smaller than the 401 Southport site, and thus, when the higher the percentage gets, it takes up more space on the property itself. So it's about 3.5 acres, zoned for residential. And again, this is it's an example of what's proposed for residential sites. All right, so keep moving. So here's some of the smaller kind of tweaks that are being proposed that I think actually will have a really big impact on the way a site feels or looks once it's developed. So staff's proposing that each tree canopy area that's preserved has to be at least 1,600 feet in size. So currently there's no size minimum. So whatever the required percentage of tree save is, it can be spread out however the regulations allow around the site. So this is designed, the minimum size is designed to prevent what's on the left of your screen. Again, I've highlighted all the tree preservation areas in green that are proposed. This is another site that's under review right now. So one of the sites you can see gets down smaller than 65 square feet. That's a tiny amount of trees being saved. It'll almost look like a landscape buffer more than an actual group of trees being preserved. So this is, I guess, the intent of this is to really have a cluster of trees that are being preserved. The other intent is for staff, when staff's reviewing a plan, if there is a certain minimum size of tree preservation, we can easily point to that and say, you have to comply with this. It's not ever going to be a necessarily back and forth between who's staff's opinion versus developer's opinion on what can count as tree save. It's just a flat, it has to be 1,600 square feet in size at least. All right, moving on. This is another, back to our friends at 401 Southport. This is another changes proposed. Currently, there is no standard minimum width that a tree canopy can, tree preservation area can measure. So if you see on the screen here, I have circled in yellow the areas that are smaller than 20 feet in width. Essentially, this idea came when looking at this specific plan, and some of your staff were talking with the developers and saying that some of those areas can't count as tree preservation. There's no way a tree grows like that. That just doesn't comply with the UDO. And again, it turned into the developer saying, well, my opinion is that it does go like that. Prove to me it doesn't. So again, I thought of just having a standard number that town staff can point to and say, you cannot have a tree preservation area that narrow. 20 feet was ultimately chosen because that is the width of one of the standard most used landscape buffers. So if someone was going to preserve trees, that 20 feet is as narrow as it's going to get. this number or the 1,600 square feet could adjust if council chooses, but that's the rationale for why we initially went with 20 feet. So another change that's proposed is having a site replant trees if the site does not have the required minimum trees. So say a site is required to save 15% tree canopy, but only 5% of the site is covered in trees. That site must then plant an additional 5% of the overall site as tree canopy. And that extra 5%, there's another section that's been added of a standard square footage, how many trees must be planted in that square footage, that would equal tree preservation. So I think I had proposed, when I spoke with council before, staff was thinking about ideas to make a developer replant all the way up to 15. I think previously there was questions about, is that truly fair to a developer? So PZB and then as well as the Environmental Stormwater Committee kind of settled on this middle ground. So have every site essentially have to plant some trees, but don't make them go all the way up to 15% if there happens to be a completely cleared site. Okay, so another major change, so this is probably the second major change besides switching to a flat percentage, it is readjusting the priority order of tree canopy that must be preserved. And I'm going to go through each of the orders. So currently the order is based on the types of trees. So mature deciduous trees and groups of those are the first priority order. Again, what this often turns into is staff saying that group of trees right there is clearly deciduous, developers saying, well, it's mixed in with evergreen, it doesn't count, there's a whole back and forth. And when staff was thinking about how to design, maybe tweak the regulations, it was to make them much more straightforward so your staff can say, look, clearly here is a floodplain or not. Clearly there is single family homes next to this or not, instead of having an opportunity for developers to really come with this back and forth kind of stuff that often happens. The other rationale for changing the priority order to what's before you is that it's based on the site itself and then what's adjacent to that site, rather than just which kind of trees are on the site. So let me just go through the order itself, and maybe it'll make a little more sense. So the first area that's the first priority order that's proposed is environmentally sensitive areas, which include wetlands, riparian buffers, and floodplains. That list may include other items. Let's say there happens to be some kind of endangered animal that is proven to be there. Maybe that could be included. But essentially, it's wetlands, riparian buffers, and floodplains. So a few reasons for this being the first priority order is it showed up very highly on both the developer survey and the citizen survey that the town conducted. It was ranked number 1 on both of those surveys as being the top priority for requiring to be preserved. It creates corridors for wildlife habitats. It prevents development in hazardous areas or areas which might flood, or helps prevent that. And it maintains local control over these regulations. So I was asked, I think last time I presented to council and the Planning and Zoning Board asked the same question, which the question was, aren't these areas already preserved? Why would we double preserve areas which already have to be preserved? So I did a little research. We talked to other planners in Wake County, talked with town stormwater staff, and essentially the answer is they aren't always required to be preserved. There are different permits that can be gotten from the state, from the federal government. The zone 2 of the riparian buffer, which is the riparian buffer, is 50 feet from the edge of a stream. There's 2 zones. The second zone is the outermost 20 feet. That is not required to be completely preserved. Trees can be removed from that area. And so the biggest answer I received from the Wake County planners was, it's up to your town if the town really wants to maintain local control over these items and not necessarily rely on a state regulation. And the other biggest one I also heard was, you're going to maintain those corridors for wildlife. So riparian buffers run along major drainage areas into larger drainage areas. And if they are not preserved, that's maintaining groups and corridors for wildlife and I guess just wildlife. So last thing, again, helping prevent any kind of development in a flood-sensitive area. There's different levels of flood zones. Clearly, the highest one is almost impossible to develop in. It takes a lot of environmental permitting, but it gets lower where you are allowed to develop, and it doesn't take that many environmental permits. This would help encourage developers to, or require developers to leave that area in trees and develop elsewhere on a site. So let me move on to number 2. So number 2 is existing tree area next to neighboring residential uses or platted tree preservation areas on adjacent parcels. So the first part of this, it's a twofold priority order area. Essentially, the first one is to require tree preservation next to single-family homes. So if you look at the image on the right side of the screen, single-family homes aren't required to have tree preservation of their own. They're required to have landscape buffers, landscaping their front yard, foundation plantings, but not necessarily tree preservation. So what the development that almost always has tree preservation is commercial sites, multifamily sites. And the thought behind this is to really, there's already a landscape buffer, but to require additional, natural trees next to a single-family home neighborhood, to get them more in a almost human scale, and to have more screening between maybe a quiet subdivision street next to a commercial site. The second part of this is next to platted tree preservation areas on adjacent sites. So again, let's pretend next to this development there is an area that's already preserved as tree canopy. Regulations basically state that it has to forever remain undisturbed. One of the goals of the amendments is to get larger groups of trees clumped together so there's more of them together. This would encourage, if your neighbor has a group of trees that are preserved, you also would have trees next to it that are preserved, thus trying to increase the size of the overall canopy together. And again, I didn't explain this, but you can see my pictures. The arrow is where I'm standing, taking the picture facing where the arrow is going. The third priority order is also a few levels within the priority order. So existing tree canopy area preserved next to areas zoned parks, greenways, and open space. So the PGO zoning it's rarely used throughout town. There's only a few sites, but it's mostly town-owned parks, maybe other nonprofit-owned park space or open space. And essentially, again, keeping more of that natural look adjacent to what's an area zoned to be natural space or open space. The second is town greenways. So the image on the bottom right side of your screen, it looks nice. It's the picture on the left side. It looks nice from the picture I took on the left side. On the right, you can see there's a town greenway that runs right through here that basically the trees were almost cleared up to the edge of the greenway. Now, this is still a single-family home neighborhood. The town did not have the authority to necessarily regulate tree preservation, but let's say a commercial site, a multifamily site is being developed adjacent to a greenway. There are several greenways around town that are still being developed and will be built by a developer as they construct the rest of the site. Staff just thought that having some way of encouraging trees to remain next to a greenway kind of really fits the idea of the greenway, instead of having just a kind of a sidewalk in an open area, but to encourage those trees next to it. And again, each of these tree canopy areas have to be at least 20 feet in width, 1,600 feet in square size at a time. The last two are freeways and railroad rights-of-way. So in staff's mind, freeways and railroads are not necessarily the best things to live around, to work around, to be adjacent to. So this would encourage or require trees be preserved next to those sites. So this picture almost works twofold. You can see this is 540 on the right side, and then let's say if this was a commercial development, tree preservation adjacent to 540, thus giving some more space, some more sound barrier away from a railroad or a 540. And then number 4, it's simple enough. It's essentially a catch-all for if there's other trees, if the site doesn't meet one of those first 3 priority orders. This maintains some flexibility to developers in the sense that if there's not any of the first 3 priority orders, they kind of get to choose where on site the trees can be saved, again, still meeting those size standards of 1,600 square feet, 20 feet in the minimum width. And then this is just a The bottom's not a great example. It's just a picture of mature trees on a site. Okay, so I'll keep moving on. I said there were 2 major changes. Actually, I'll make it 3. This is the 3rd major change. So that top paragraph says that currently in the UDO, a developer can reduce the amount of required tree preservation by up to 49%. They do not have to seek council approval, planning director approval. They are just allowed to do this. Now, they have to replant those trees on site or on an adjacent site or other approved location in town. But the replanted trees are not the same as preserving trees that could have had years and years to grow. They often end up mixed with a landscape buffer. It often ends up with, again, your town staff having to say, you miscounted the trees. There's actually more trees than you counted, and you're taking them away, and a lot of back and forth. I'll say it's been a personal goal of mine to have this removed from the UDO for a few years, but this is a major change. This happens, I'd estimate, 30 to 40% of developments that come in kind of take advantage of this option. Now, with that said, staff is proposing that there is an administrative adjustment, that this be replaced with administrative adjustment. This is a true application that a development has to go through, and the planning director has to approve it only if the application meets the standards at the bottom of the slide. So it's a true, if there's a true, what's the word, hardship, property is a real funny shaped piece of property, the planning director can authorize up to a 5 percentage points reduction in the required tree preservation. Now, one concern staff does have about removing the 49% reduction is that it offers, that reduction offers a lot of flexibility to developments. So a risk that I see in making these changes is that we're going to have a development come in which needs more than 5% and truly does need that. Now, what's going to happen then is staff's going to recommend that they apply for a variance if they want to pursue that. It would have to go before the Planning and Zoning Board and again meet criteria to prove that it's a technically needed variation that wouldn't be granted to other sites. So there is, the regulations are getting harsher with a little bit of a adjustment, but if it's a true need, there has to be some other kind of board action through a variance. And it would be granted if it's truly a technical need for the site. And then the last slide I have in the tree protection is about the location of the tree protection fencing. So staff is recommending, so currently tree protection fencing has to be installed at the drip line of a tree that's on the edge of the tree protection fencing boundary. So your fencing ends up in circles around a site. Staff is recommending that it just be a number, not necessarily the drip line. And there's a few reasons for that, but the biggest reason, I'll tell you, is again, this turns into where is the exact location of this drip line for every single tree adjacent to a tree protection fencing. So the number itself has moved around a little bit. It's currently proposed at 10 feet from the trunk of the nearest tree that's located within a tree preservation area. Again, this number's jumped around somewhat. The Environmental and Stormwater Committee recommended it remain at the drip line. Staff would prefer it remain a hard number, but again, that number could change, or the drip line, if council desires, could remain that boundary for the tree protection fencing. Okay, so that's the end of the tree preservation section, and I can move on to common open space if you prefer.
Okay. Do you want questions by section, or do you want to? I think that'll probably be better while it's kind of fresh.
Okay.
I've got a couple of things I have questions about or thoughts to share with the council. Starting with the last one. Under what circumstances would the fence be less than the 10 feet? I mean, most tree canopy of any is at least 10 feet, so this seems like less rather than more, even though it's a little inconvenient.
The 10 feet could be less than a larger tree. It could be a little farther on a smaller tree. So having the hard number trades off. You're not necessarily going to get the drip line. It's going to be, some trees are going to hang over that fence. Other trees will be within the fence with the drip
Okay.
branches.
But in the end, trees are staying or not, and the fencing is just the fencing.
Right.
Essentially.
Right. So the fencing is installed prior to any kind of development activity on a site. It's the last thing that gets approved by the town before a developer can actually start doing any kind of construction.
Okay. Personally, I'd lean towards just leaving it at the drip line then. It's kind of what we've been doing. So for just general tree preservation, I appreciate the going with a hard number. I want to sort of not start from zero, but start from where we have a sustainable town. So I would see that more as 20 and 25% rather than 15 and 20, because I believe that Wake County is looking for 30% tree preservation across the county. So if we can strive to get started with a higher number to begin, I think that would be good. I'm really concerned about the sites being less than 5 acres. I think I'm jumping ahead. Yeah, that was the open space, sorry. For attachment 3, the tree preservation table, if we could go ahead and add Morrisville and what we would look like compared to them for an ease of comparison, because we have those other communities, but where do we fall on that? That'd be helpful.
Sure.
Excuse me. I appreciate the time and effort that MESC took to provide their comments. About the 5% minimum tree replant, once again, coming at it from, we're trying to create a sustainable community. Even if it's totally clear cut, I don't want just 5% there. I'd like whatever we come up with, be that 15% or 20%. I believe that the development community, they're looking for clarity and certainty, and we can give that to them. And they might not be as happy with the numbers that we come up with, but if we're looking towards a sustainable future, I think if someone clear cuts and 2 years later they come back and say, okay, now it's just 5%, that's not really our intent. Our intent is to get to these numbers, and I'm mostly talking to my fellow council members when I say that. The tree order as revised sounds really good. I think you guys have made some nice changes there. I support your hope that we get rid of that by right waiver of the 49%. I think that you're coming up with a good middle solution there, that they'd really have to prove it to us. Anything that we can do to make it easier for you to meet the intent of the council and not have these little back and forth arguments, I think that's really important, because that gives them the certainty as well. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I just want to say that we want to make sure that we have enough trees to provide shade, cooling, fresh oxygen. This is not just about the numbers. This is about maintaining a livable planet. So I might have to circle back if I think of something else, but those were my main thoughts on the tree preservation at this time. I think I saw Councilmember Fender first, followed by Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson.
Yeah, I want to commend you and Michelle for putting this together. I realize it was a lot of work, and I'm really pleased with the proposal that you guys have come up with. I really like getting rid of the percentage table and determining how many trees need to be retained. I like the flat 15% and 20% requirement, and I'm okay with those percentages. Let's see. What was the other thing I wanted to make a comment on? Yeah, I agree with getting rid of the 49% waiver, and I agree with the, require, if they only have 5% trees on existing property, to have them plant at least 5% in addition. Can you bring up the attachment where it has the table comparing the percentage trees that would have been retained if we had already implemented this, and what the differential is?
Yes, I think that's. let me find which attachment that was. But thank you, first of all. Let me find that attachment. Surrounding community standards. Oh, wait, that's not it. That's not the one, is it now? Sorry. Is this it? Oh, here we go. All right, that's it.
Yeah, this one really shows if we had already implemented these standards, the additional trees that we would have. And it makes me kind of sad that that these percentages were not already in place. I am concerned that we need to act quickly and agree on the UDO and get it approved. As you say, that the development that's already in the process, the UDO will not apply to them. So, you know, I would love to save all the trees if possible, but I realize that that is not realistic and it's not feasible if we're going to have any sort of growth in town of Morrisville. So I'm willing to compromise and to be realistic. And I think what you guys have presented here is realistic, and it's still making a positive impact. It's going to make a difference on this town, but I just think we need to go ahead and come to agreement on it and pass these UDO text amendments so we can actually start reaping the benefits of this. So that's all I had.
Thank you. Councilmember Scroggins Johnson, followed by Councilmember Rabati, please.
Well done, and this is a very complex topic, tree preservation. I was fortunate enough to be on the council when Mayor Stolman was in place, and we talked about tree preservation back then, and there was like little to none really in our code. And, you know, although the code today is not as robust as we would like, we have been making some very good incremental changes, and now almost 5 years later, I'm really impressed with how thoughtful you were, how you presented us with visual examples that kind of really brought home the impact. Going from a 10% to a 15%, that's 50% more trees. I mean, it sounds small, but it really is a significant impact in the way that we are thoughtfully protecting the environment as well as for our wildlife that live in our riparian buffers in nearby areas. So I really appreciate that thoughtfulness.
Thank you.
I really like the wider, the width, you know, requirement. I think that's very interesting. It's like, it just makes sense. And I too have been disappointed with some of the developments where you're getting confused if that's a landscape buffer or if it's a tree save, because it just doesn't feel like it's a tree save. So now with width requirements, I think it'll be a little more of a really evident, intentional canopy area that will be helpful. So that's a wonderful add. And then I like the order. I thought that was really well presented, and it makes logical sense. And so overall, I would support the recommendation of staff. I think that the urgency stated by Councilmember Fender is in alignment with my own. We need to do more. We have to go by 80-20. This is a great improvement. Sure, we could kind of discuss, you know, tweaking a little here, tweaking a little there, but we really need to be moving forward now so that the applications that come in after the UDO is updated can take some of these requirements in and do their planning and make successful projects for the town as well. So I wouldn't, at this time, recommend any changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Rabadi.
Yeah, well, I echo what everyone else has said. Great work, especially closing that 49% loophole. I don't know how I didn't know that was there, but the thought of it is appalling, so I'm glad that we did that. So I agree with 95% of what you laid out here. I would like to see us being a little bit stricter on the one area where there's not enough trees on the site, so you have to plant 5% more. I would like to see us getting back up to 15. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that our guideline is we want 15% of tree preservation, so you have to, if you don't have it, you have to do it. If there's not widespread support for that, then that's fine, but that'd be my preference. And I think the changes that you made to the minimum sizes and shapes of the protected tree canopy areas are really going to help us with this, because I see that those little skinny lines of green, and that's just not what we're going for. So I think that the changes that you've made here really capture and will help us to codify what we're trying to do. So I really do. I think this is some great work here.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent. Looking for Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
So yeah, this is great work, Chris. So thank you for bringing this forward. And I know how complex the old system was, and I fear that not by any person here in this organization's fault, but that the old way somehow we were at a disadvantage. And you're right, there was a lot of back and forth, and that needs to go by the wayside. So having said all that, I would also say once we do adopt this, I do think it's something we should come back to and look at and refresh. We do that with a lot of our other plans. We say, we're going to relook in 5 years, 10 years. 10 years is too long for this town. But I do think it's something we need to come back to and make sure that it is accomplishing the goals that we anticipate. And sometimes we don't know that until we put something in action, adopt something and see it in action, that it really accomplishes what we want. But so anyhow, so that I would hope to see that. I know you started by saying this is on our time frame, but I too would like to see this happen a whole lot quicker. I do not want to see this drag. There is a lot more development coming here into the town, and I want to make sure that that what we decide on, what council decides on, is enacted sooner than later. So, so I too would hope to do this quickly. I guess I'm going to. Councilmember Rabadi said something that also concerns me about the percentage. If there's only 5%, if there's not 15% of tree canopy, and how we handle that, I too would like to see that bumped up a little bit. And I thought our old plan handled that kind of a situation to some degree, and I could be wrong, but so anyhow, I would prefer to see that stiffened up a little bit more, or increased a little bit more, whatever the right wording is. And then the only other comment I have right now, and I'm going to tell you I'll probably have more comments the next time we look over this, but I appreciate the examples you put in here to show us like where the tree preservation would be, and this idea that you want the 1,600 square feet minimum and the 20-foot width minimum and all that. But is that going to guarantee that we see, like in the one example you did on slide like 13, the one where it looks like the tree preservation is all, thank you. It looks like it's all in the back, and then there's tiny little pockets. Is everything we're doing here going to eliminate that situation? Is it going to bring the trees around the property some more and to the frontage more than the back, or is that not going to accomplish that goal? And that may be
Yeah.
my only goal, only my goal.
That's a great question. So I'll say that 1,600 square feet was not, I didn't come up with that after a scientific study. It came out with different staff looking at sites, thinking about it. And I think the 1,600 exactly was proposed by the town engineer, Mark. Here's what I think about this specific site. If we look at it, so it's tough because each individual site is going to be different. This site has 2 single-family homes on the southern side. So that is, what is that, priority order number 2. I would say that the tree preservation on this site would need to be grouped mostly along that southern property line next to the homes in that order. Now, when I look at this, there's already fairly clumped along that side. So is it going to eliminate this completely? Probably not. I think the size would need to be probably increased somehow. But what I'd mention is that if this has to be, 1,500 square feet bigger, there's going to be less over here or over here. But
So there's trade-offs.
that's there's trade-offs. But I'd say if your goal is to really get those bigger groups, that number, a 1,600 square foot number, might need to be raised somehow.
Okay, something to mull over and think about. So, okay, thank you. Those are, I think, my only comments I have right now. Oh, and the variance, thank you for, because I wondered that myself. There are often times where we think we have written an ordinance that's going to work, and then there's always that outlier where it just doesn't work. And so I wanted to make sure there was some method, whether you all handle it or the variance, or it comes to council or whatever. But I'm happy to hear there's some way to handle those outlier situations.
Yeah. Well, and repeated variances for the same exact regulation are kind of a policy failure, but I wouldn't suspect that there would be repeated. It would be for those true extreme situations.
Well, and it's important to at least plan for that. You hope that wouldn't happen, but at least have a plan for it. Okay. And that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Rao is next. Could I ask a quick favor, Steve, while this slide is up? Could I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
So we have 4 priority orders, and one that isn't included here but was in the surveys was, would you like the trees to be preserved at the front or something like that, or road fronting? So that's not part of this. And that's kind of what Mayor Pro Tem was asking about, it sounds like. Is that correct?
So yes, so that did not end up in the priority order. However, in the landscaping section, I'm going to get to later, the trees that are in a street yard buffer, so the front buffer along the road, if I think we proposed 12 inches or larger, have to be preserved and have to remain. So that idea came from actually the town of Cary research we'd done there, and I have an image of a site under development there, which shows how trees are preserved along the road there. So it's not in the priority order. That was probably the most unpopular thing that was proposed that came out of the development forum, and just the description of how difficult that might be at the very front of a site, getting the grading right. But it's not in the priority order, but it's in the landscaping section, but it's slightly reduced from a purely strict do not touch this area at all.
Okay. So. Thank you for that clarification, and thank you, Councilman Morrell, for letting me interject. Your turn for your questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of my questions have already been asked in comments, but I just want to thank you for the good work. And what I hope we would have down the road is maybe even like a visual of, as we look at the areas in Morrisville that we know we're going to have multifamily, is what it will look like with this, in place. And I'm sure that even if it's a, slide, it'd be nice to kind of see, to show our residents even of the remaining amount of Morrisville and how many more trees we would have. And what triggered that thought is, I feel like Councilmember Fender that, it's unfortunate that we can look back and see that we could have saved so many more trees and we didn't. But, now we have the chance of the remaining amount. And I hope that it can be conveyed even to the development community, whatever they can do to work with us, particularly now with our sustainability efforts. I think it's critically important that we work with them and to the extent we can. If there's incentives we can put in place or partnerships we can, have with them to have them do something that they might not have been as comfortable doing, just, to save more trees. So I get that. I guess only time will tell, but I think this is a good first start to head down that direction. So thank you.
Okay. Everyone's had an opportunity to speak. I'll circle back to Councilmember Rabadi and anyone else who wants second comments on tree preservation.
Yeah, so on the slide that we're actually looking at, I'm looking at the area that they're counting as tree preservation, this green down here, right on there. Okay, but then I'm looking across at the property, and along most of there's no trees. So how is that getting counted as tree preservation?
Sure. So I'll say this is just like the other one. This is an earlier version of the plan, so it's not going to end up exactly like this. So this is actually one of the ones that kind of has a little back and forth. So if you see towards the middle bottom of that parcel, there are trees that don't have as many leaves. The plan has been tweaked throughout the process. This is an early review. It's on its third or fourth review now. Those are actually deciduous trees, and when it was re-examined, those were actually the top priority order compared to some of these other areas that were groups of like pine trees or evergreens. So this isn't the final version. You'll also notice that you don't see the drip line in a lot of these areas. It's a lot of boxes. And sometimes boxes are okay because that actually goes outside the drip line, but a lot of times the tree protection fencing, they squeeze it as tightly as they can where it has to go. So when I was designing this PowerPoint, kind of what I wanted to show council is what your planning staff, what gets submitted to planning staff and what has to go through the process. But you're right. And again, this one, there's something else that I don't know how to fix via necessary regulations are some of the tree canopies can have a majority of it on their site, but it crosses over into adjacent site. Does that count? We don't let that count, but again, that's another thing. Developers come in and say, well, we got this tree. We're saving the tree even though it goes on my neighbor's property. A lot of those little questions. But yeah, those trees, there's a kind of a circle at the very middle bottom of that property. Those are deciduous trees, which this happened to be the time of season when they were either growing leaves or losing their leaves.
Oh, okay. All right. But, and not knocking down a tree on your neighbor's property, which is illegal, really probably shouldn't count toward you saving a tree. That's not really saving a tree.
Agree. And
it's not committing a felony.
Right. Well, and I'll say, I don't mean to sound like your staff doesn't understand the regulations or has a hard time, but a lot of development projects from the very get-go have attorneys meet with us the very first meeting, and attorneys with them, and they're always looking on how to tweak every rule to favor their client. So that's kind of what your staff are looking at. Every plan we get, there's always money and an attorney and this person and that. Yeah. So that's why that clarity for not only the developer but your staff, I think, is very valuable.
Yeah, if these rules are going to save you some of that, I'm in.
If I could ask you to go back, and then Councilmember Fender, to one of the early slides where you show which has 15% and which has 20% by multifamily versus mixed use.
Oh, yeah. So just this slide here?
Okay, so mixed use, which I think is going to be a lot of our future. Why is that at the 15% while apartments are at the 20%? Because I think of mixed use as apartments above retail, which is essentially apartments.
That's true. So this was not changed. So those two groups, so the non-residential and mixed use, and then the single-family attached, group living, multifamily, that's exactly what the UDO says today. And I just kept the two divisions because that's the way it had been with the different groupings. And that's the only reason.
Okay, because essentially, in my opinion, that's kind of like the same building, a multifamily apartment and a mixed use, which is essentially the same thing with retail underneath. So if we're looking to preserve trees, I'd be curious if the rest of the council would be interested in moving mixed use into the other category, because that's just a carryover. It's not really based on anything. And if we're trying to preserve trees into future development, that would be a place that we could do it legally with authority. So if that's something staff could as one of the questions and points as we have public hearings and we finish up. I'd appreciate that. Councilmember Fender.
I was going to ask a question about the slide we were looking at prior to this with the little patch of trees. So what's this percentage of trees that they're saving now? Is this 10%?
I would assume so, because it looks, so it currently, if a site's 100% covered in tree canopy, they have to save 10%.
Okay.
So I think their goal was 10%. I don't think they got there necessarily on this plan set.
So if if we had the UDO that you proposed implemented, in addition to having that little square being larger to 1,600, that would they would have an additional 5% overall.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So that was a good first take at a discussion that's going to be ongoing. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson.
I know you said this, Chris, and I've forgotten it already. Remind me why you came up with the 15% and the 20%. What is that
Well, so for a commercial site, 10% is the maximum. Knew the goal was to increase it, so jumped it up 5%. The 20% is slightly higher than what a multifamily would have to save now, which is, I think, 19 or 18%. But basically, we took what the existing top number is and increased it somewhat.
A little bit. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping for 25 instead of 20, because 19 to 20 isn't that significant. Okay. So like I said, that's the first of a number of things he's going to be going over with us, but that's one of our bigger decision points is the tree preservation, which has been really urgent for a lot of people. So you can move on to the next section, please, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Where are we at? Common open space. Okay, so the next section is common open space. So again, this doesn't necessarily, the name I've always thought was a little misleading. This is for a non-residential space to provide some sort of outdoor space. Often the town approves plans that has gazebos, benches, maybe a walking path on a site. The reason some of the changes are proposed today are that a lot of developments or developers come in and say this isn't really appropriate for our site, whether it be industrial, whether it be a bank. Those are two specific examples that have always stuck out in my head. So currently, common open space is required for all non-residential sites and mixed-use sites. So basically, if there's a commercial component, some kind of common open space is required, and that the percentage ranges from 5 to 15%, depending on more specific things. So basically, currently the UDO requires it at all sites, and it has a kind of a broad range of allowable uses, and these include stormwater ponds. So if you go to a I'm trying to think of one. So if you go to, let's say Church Street Park, there's educational signage about the stormwater pond and a few benches. That can count for your common open space. If you don't have any of that educational or benching or anything, then it can't count. But things like that can count. A natural resource area, which is kind of a vague term, but I think we all kind of know what it means, that can count for your common open space. And public access easements, so let's say you have a high wire electrical line running on your property. If you put a walking path or some kind of other passive or active recreational space, that can count towards common open space. A few changes are proposed. This is my last slide on common open space. Basically, the proposal is to essentially make it so sites have to be larger to have to provide common open space, but the type of common open space has to be more focused on actual usable passive or active recreation areas, restaurants, outdoor dining areas, things like that. So instead of requiring every single parcel in town to provide some level of common open space, whether it be a bench, some kind of outdoor small walking path, it's to really have a bigger site and to really concentrate that space for people to use. The proposal also exempts most industrial uses. The industrial use providing common open space has been in my time with Morrisville reviewing plans, working with developers, the developers who really don't want this space, and a lot of it, they just point to larger trucks, a lot of heavier industrial traffic, not really wanting people to be hanging out in areas around, really to be conducting their business and then leaving. And then the final change to common open space is that, let's say it is required on one of those sites that's 5 acres or larger, they could basically switch the percentages around so that additional tree preservation can count towards some of that common open space. That's that section.
Okay, I have some comments on that one. I would support the idea of trading common open space for tree preservation. I'm not that comfortable with exempting industrial uses. They can be creative and have space for their employees, or have a greenway or something that's useful. The 5 acres in size, I'm also not that supportive of getting rid of a regulation just because of size. I think there could be a very nice pocket park or some kind of attractive area near a bank, for example. 5 acres is pretty big. So I think that providing the common open space and keeping it for all of these things is important. Focusing the required spaces to be more usable gathering, I think that's great. I don't think it has to be an either or. I think we can ask for that and not give up or waive the ability to have more common open space, because I think a lot of my thoughts about McCrimmon Parkway, for example, and how we extended it, we want that now to be for everyone. That's why we want it to be mixed use. That's why we want it to be attractive and walkable and vibrant. And by giving up any common space requirements, we lose out on opportunities for small destinations, micro destinations, and parks along the way. So that's my hope, is that we can support making it better without giving up anything, because it's within our control. Councilmember Scroggins Johnson?
So I do not agree with the mayor on the industrial uses. I think there's a lot of safety issues with areas that are zoned industrial. We don't want people walking through some of those areas for their safety. There's, possibly large trucks, there's traffic, there's access issues, and the existing industrial areas are not designed for this, and I don't know how going forward an industrial site can accommodate some of these open space requirements into their design that would be safe. So I don't have enough information to really make an assessment on industrial uses, other than the fact that our current industrial uses don't have the open space access for a reason. And so I'd tread lightly on that. I do like the rest as stated by staff. So thank you.
Councilmember Rabadi, please.
I agree with Councilmember Scroggins Johnson about the industrial uses. I don't see really the benefit of forcing an industrial site to put in a pocket park. Like, I just don't think that's a fair use of that space, and I do agree that there are numerous safety concerns. The development required to provide common open space to be at least 5 acres in size. 5 acres to me is a pretty big parcel. I think that, like, if there's going to be a parcel that you're just going to put a bank on, is that going to be a 5-acre parcel, or is it more likely to be a 3-acre parcel or even a 2-acre parcel? In other words, if there's going to be one business, and it's going to be a business that we don't necessarily think should have to provide common open space like a bank, they just want you to do your business and leave. I mean, I think I would be more comfortable if that was 3 acres. Like, if the site, because I think it's fair to say that if the site will only accommodate the business and the parking for the business, and we're trying to get them to squeeze an amenity onto there, I don't think that's reasonable on our part. But 5 acres feels like a big site. Like, I feel like, yeah, you could put a pocket park on 5 acres. Like, what's the problem?
Okay. I was scrolling. I was trying to find a site in town that's around 5 acres to use as reference, but I can't think of any.
Well, like, for example, how big is that 5/3 bank or whatever it is?
Let's see. Yeah, this is the last bank, and that was the bank that was, when I talk about a bank being against the common open space, that was the one.
I mean, because that's a pretty small parcel. Like, I can see their point.
That is just over an acre.
Okay, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, that, I agree that they shouldn't have to spend, because that ends up being quite a percentage of the actual property, no matter what you put in there. So I think that, on a 1 acre site, even a 2 acre site, I see your point. I think 3 acres should really be the max there.
Okay.
5 acres, put in, if you have 5 acres, put in a playground.
Councilmember Fender, please.
A couple of questions. I agree with Councilmember Robati. The 5 acres is too much, and I like the number 3 in there. I think that's a good compromise. I'm in agreement regarding the exempting industrial uses. However, I am curious, are there examples of what a developer of an industrial property have done in the past?
I'm sure I could think of some. Let's see. Well, so I haven't been personally involved with many of the true industrial uses here. I said back to the 401 Southport, which I showed earlier. They voluntarily, from the first time we met with them, which was last November, December, for their employees, they wanted to include an outdoor recreation area, which I think is going to turn into a beach volleyball court. That one, and that one is somewhat manufacturing. It's in the industrial district. It's right on International Drive, surrounded by other kind of heavier industrial. That one is a little different than, say, just up International Drive. You got the solid waste transfer station. You have the concrete plant that's both under construction right now, the very end of International Drive. Those are more the industrial sites we're looking at. And some of the reason this came up was some of the conversations about the Public Works redevelopment site, and basically, town staff asking the planning staff, well, where should we put this common open space? Well, what are you looking for? We're going to have people dropping off their trash, doing other things. And that's kind of where this idea came from. And, as I'm listening to y'all, if there's a way you would be interested in me maybe identifying specific uses, such as a concrete plant or something like that, that's other options that we could look into.
Well, was the concrete plant required to have any open space?
It was, but that's one of the few projects in town I have not been involved with, and I can't think of what they. I don't know if you heard her said there's benches around the stormwater pond.
I bet those get a lot of use.
Probably a lot of cigarette butts underneath the benches. Okay, yeah, I guess, I'm in agreement with Councilmember Robati and Councilmember Scroggins-Johnson about of exempting industrial uses, but my thinking is now that if some of the industrial developers are doing it now, then it can be done. I understand though, like if it's a warehouse, a distribution warehouse, and you've got 18-wheelers going in and out, then yes, that's a safety issue, and we shouldn't require them to have an open space.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess that's kind of flaky. It's not one way or the other, but I could go either way.
Well, and the more I think about it while I'm up here and I hear that, maybe going through and identifying more specific uses probably is more appropriate than just, might be more appropriate than just industrial uses.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, and then I think Councilmember Rabadi again, or I'm not sure.
Oh, no.
Okay.
So I feel like I have to weigh in on this industrial use thing too, Chris. I'm not so sure I want to exempt them. If we exempt, well, let me back up a minute. What is the definition? Why do we have common open space? Is the idea of a common open space is to allow the public to come and use it? Or is it just the users of that particular development to use the common open space? I guess I'm confused on, because I've heard different things.
So the common open space is in the same chapter of the UDO as public recreation area. Public recreation area is for a residential development for true land that's dedicated to the town or not a private or a nonprofit entity to replace, a park that would be in a higher density area. Common open space is, I'm gonna try to read it off the thing here. It's essentially for the enjoyment, how do we say this? It serves numerous purposes, including preservation and protection of natural areas and features, providing opportunities for passive and active recreation, reducing flooding, mitigation of heat islands, and it's for the use and enjoyment of the development's occupants and users.
Okay, that helps. I like the idea of preserving for the natural areas and all of that. I guess, but my fear is if we exempt them, that means they just build and develop more square footage that gives them the potential to build, and maybe I'm looking at it wrong. If it gives them the potential to build more in a bigger facility, then I don't want to exempt them in here. Maybe we need to come up with some other uses or ideas or thoughts for them to preserve some more trees instead of having common open space. I understand the safety issue, and I would 100% agree with that. There are some places where it's not feasible to have anybody, even their employees, for whatever reason, in a particular common area outside. So maybe we need to think about that a little bit more. I don't know. Okay. Or maybe I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I believe everyone who wanted to discuss this.
I'm sorry. No, I forgot. I had one more thought too. When we talked about it, you bringing us back examples. Can you bring us back examples too of I know you just tried really quick, but of a 5-acre site, a 3-acre site, kind of what that looks like, so we have a better idea. A visual is always really helpful, so maybe it would be helpful for me.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone who wanted a chance had a chance. I just want to clarify that there is the requirement for industrial now to provide the common open space. Is that accurate? Mm-hmm. There isn't any requirement that it's accessible to a public sidewalk or to a frontage in a safe manner. Is that accurate? Is that something that we could introduce?
I don't think it's back to, there's a line, and I'm going to be close to it, but a little off, but it's got to be accessible to the site. I don't think it has to tie back to a public sidewalk.
So I'd be curious about that, because that could address the safety issue. I don't want people walking in front of 18-wheelers, obviously, to get to benches around a stormwater pond, but if there's a path to it and it can be safe, or the thing that's really attractive to me about not exempting them is that they would probably end up using this to increase the tree preservation. If they could trade it for tree preservation, if they're not providing something, like if it is a safety issue, we get more trees. If it's not a safety issue, we get something for the community to enjoy. So I understand the safety issues, but if we are trying to create a better community, this is an opportunity within our authority.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fender.
Yeah, I just want to add a comment to that. Like he read from the definition of the common open space, it's not necessarily for the public. I still, it can be for the occupants of that site. And I think you're still, if you're just focused on it has to be accessible to the public, I just think you can have benefits of still requiring the open space and just having it be accessible for the employees, because for two reasons. One, you're providing them, the employees, a benefit. And then two, going back to the definition of the common open space that Chris read, it's to prevent heat islands. And for that reason, especially, I am against exempting the industrial uses. I mean, maybe there's a compromise we can come up with for the 18-wheelers going in and out. However, for all the other industrial uses, I think it's a benefit to keep the common open space requirement just to prevent more ground being covered with asphalt or concrete, and to decrease the amount of heat island that we have as a town.
Thank you. Councilmember Rabadi?
So that's a really good point, but the thing is that I don't think that we should get into discussions of how employers treat their employees or what benefits we think they should provide. I think we should kind of table that. But I do think that's a really good point about the heat islands. So what if industrial users could reduce the common open space by 100% if additional tree canopy is reserved? So they have to provide, right now, they have to provide a certain amount of common open space. If they're unwilling to provide that, then they can provide that in saving additional trees. And if they don't have the trees, they can plant them. I mean, I think kind of answers both questions, because making them do a common open space that's not accessible to the public doesn't have anything to do with our vision for the town, because that's not going to be something anyone in the town can use unless they work for that company. But if they could reduce the common open space and cover what would be common open space with trees, I think that might be a win-win.
Yeah, and I'll say for common open space, it's not necessarily, again, it's not a green space on a property. It actually sometimes can encourage more impervious surface through concrete, through benches, through gazebos, other things similar to that. So, but I think there is room for that trade-off, if you'd like me to think of some stuff.
Councilmember Scroggins Johnson, please.
So I'm aware that we're probably over time on this. I'd like to request that staff investigate this industrial uses area a little bit further. If you could bring back some visualizations and examples of existing properties that have some open space elements so that we could better understand and maybe break down some categories a little bit. I think that would really help the council come together on an alignment so that it would be a more productive discussion. Plus, we're missing one of our council members, and I think he probably would have some insight into this as well. Okay. So thank you.
I can bring back examples and pictures, yeah.
Yeah, pictures. Thank you.
Thank you. And one thing I've been talking about, no, Councilmember Rao hasn't had a chance, so please.
One thought I had with industrial use is if we did, to my knowledge, breweries are industrial use, right? So we had brewery, and then we had open space around the brewery where people could hang out and gather. That would be one good area, something to think about.
Yeah. I will say that the specific text, I didn't include this on here. I had the same exact thought. There are exempt, so that breweries, distilleries, wineries, and industrial parks, the larger parks, would still have to provide that common open space. So we had the same thought on that.
Okay.
So I had mentioned a couple of times how it's for the community and this common open space would be for everybody. But when you talk about the sand volleyball court for an industrial user, they wouldn't want people without a waiver using that park. So I understand there's a balance on stuff like that. Okay, anything else on common open space at this time? We're having a public hearing at our next meeting, and we're opting to decide early August, so we have more time to discuss this. But I think we had a really good conversation here on this item. Chris, if you want to move to the next one.
Okay. Perimeter buffers, I got 3 slides on this section. Again, this applies to a street yard buffer or a buffer adjacent to another use. So I'll just jump into it here. So overall, in staff's opinion, the landscaping buffer section works very well. It's a great section of UDO. There are a few proposed changes, though. The main goal of the landscaping buffer changes almost ties back to tree preservation. It's about ways to either require or incentivize developers to use existing trees for the buffer instead of just clearing and planting new trees. So the first amendment would require any trees that are 12 inches or larger in caliper to remain and serve as part of a street yard buffer. So below is an example. Again, this is an idea that kind of staff stole from Cary. This is a site right on Chapel Hill Road near its intersection with Maynard Road. And you can see I've kind of identified here the trees that were remained in the buffer. They're very far back from the existing road because this is going to be widened somewhat. But essentially, that's the first amendment's proposed amendment. This number of 12-inch trees, it's jumped around a little, kind of all over the place. It's been lower than that. It's been higher than that. 12 inches seems to have been a good compromise between the various boards and outreach that staff have done. The next proposed amendment is, this one's a little tricky. Let me try to explain it. So essentially, every side of a parcel is required to have a landscape buffer that is specified in the UDO. Let's say three 15-feet trees per every 100 feet. Currently, if a developer wants to use existing trees, they have to survey those trees to prove there's at least 3 15-feet tall trees for every 100 feet. And if there's not, they have to plant new trees in between that to make the buffer meet that standard of 3 15-foot trees for every 100 feet. So essentially, this in some ways, I can't tell you that this is the reason that sites get cut down and just replanted, but in some ways, it almost doesn't incentivize the developer just to say, well, we've got trees there, let's just leave them there. Because then they still have to replant and go through the process of paying a surveyor to go out and look at it. So essentially, this proposed amendment would say, if you have existing tree canopies, such as the image below, and it is at least the width of the largest buffer that's required, because there's 2 buffer types, one's narrower, one's wider. If you have the larger of the 2 buffer types, and you can see it on an image like this, that can serve as your perimeter buffer. That's kind of the long and short of that proposal. And then the last section is about something called green stormwater infrastructure. Learned a decent amount about this recently, probably about 6 months ago. I'd never heard of it. We had a developer come in, work with our stormwater staff to try to develop this thing called green stormwater infrastructure. Currently, the UDO does not allow it because basically a landscape buffer so buildings have setbacks from the road. A buffer is a setback for essentially every other thing on a property. Parking lots, things like that. So the green stormwater infrastructure does require some hard infrastructure underground sometimes within a buffer. So staff's proposing this. We worked with the town stormwater staff again to kind of develop some regulations just to initially allow this green stormwater infrastructure called GSI within a buffer. It has to stay away from any plantings, and there's certain feet. We have 10 feet from any plantings, and this is essentially a different way to capture stormwater than a large stormwater pond. They're distributed through a site. The intent is almost to not notice they are there, and I wish I had brought examples now in pictures, but I can do that next time. That's the last amendment, just basically to allow these to go within a buffer itself. And that is the end of the landscaping buffer section. I can move on if you'd like, or if there's any, okay.
Well, just a quick question. Sure. Yeah, those examples would be great for green stormwater infrastructure on slide 28, the one before. I know you tried to explain it. It seems to me like that is crying for their lawyers to say, yeah, it meets it. and staff says, no, I don't think it really does. So you're trying to get away from the interpretation. That seemed just really loose.
That's there's been a point of a lot of staff discussions. So yes, there's been a lot of discussion on how is that actually going to be regulated. So essentially, the trunks of the trees would need to be within that width of that buffer, and then the specific language has been crafted so it has to still form a dense buffer similar to how a new planting would be required. So you are right. You picked up. It is going to be somewhat subjective. However, its intent is to allow more trees to be preserved rather than having them cleared out, replanted with new plantings.
If you feel that's the outcome and the rest of the staff believes that's the case and the development community agrees, I'm with you.
Well, and I'll ask, the earlier proposal said that it has to be double the width of the normal buffer. Developers and some other talk kind of seem to say that really won't help incentivize remaining trees because you're taking more land. So you're right, staff has thought a lot about this to figure out how to get this implemented, but basically the tree trunks will need to be within that let's say 20 feet like this example, and then the tree protection fencing will still need to go 10 feet from the trunk or at the drip line or something like that.
Okay, if you guys think that's reasonable, thanks. I just wanted that clarification.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? Councilmember Fender?
Yeah, I had a question. I think it's on the first slide for your landscaping. The sentence that says that one of the two changes does not include dense evergreen hedges required about mechanical equipment.
Is that the next section?
That's in the next section. I can get to that.
So we're not quite there.
I thought we were there. Okay.
And Mayor, if you don't mind, if I could explain a little more on this, I just kind of thought of this. So the thought that comes from behind this is we've had several plans in the last few years that have been adjacent to 540, adjacent to railroad tracks that are just thick, heavily wooded areas. And some of the landscape buffers require shrubs. And the shrubs or smaller trees just wouldn't grow in those areas. And it almost seemed sometimes nonsensical to have additional plantings in an area that's just been trees for I don't know, decades or so. So that's really more what we've been requested to allow this to use, not necessarily this example, but again, it is hopefully save more existing trees.
Yeah, if you guys can give yourselves a little flexibility and still provide clarity and certainty to the development community, I think that's a win-win. So
awesome. Thank you.
You guys have been creative. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
I think we're ready to move on to perimeter.
Okay. And then landscaping, this is just the section of the UDO that deals with every other landscaping issue, from foundation plantings to trees and parking lots, things like that. Just one slide. Not a lot of changes. The first one is to have all shrubs be recommended. All shrubs be 24 inches in height at planting. Currently, there's some that are 18 required, some that are 30, some that are 24. I just thought to keep it all consistent. And then this does not include dense evergreen hedges that are required for screening of things. So screening of loading spaces, screening of mechanical equipment, transformers, other things that require specifically a dense evergreen hedge. Those have to be at least the height of the unit itself. Currently, the UDO, moving on to the second bullet point, the UDO doesn't require foundation plantings everywhere. Designing a site, you can have a building, then a sidewalk, then immediately into the parking lot with no plantings. This would change that requirement so that buildings facing streets or parking lots do have to have foundation plantings. And then the last slide is just to point out that separate from the UDO, there's a UDO administrative manual which helps staff administer the UDO and helps developers understand how to comply with the UDO. And there's a list of recommended shrubs and trees that staff compares landscaping plans to make sure it matches trees that are generally native to this area or generally grow well in this area of the world. And that is the last of my slides. I have a few more. Essentially, staff recommends approval with or without changes. The Planning and Zoning Board recommended unanimous approval. And then your next meeting will be the public hearing, July 26th.
Okay, anything on landscaping? Yeah, I think I speak for all of us. This was a really good, comprehensive presentation that's been a couple of years in the making, really. Been working hard on this, so thank you so much. And I know you've been hearing our input for a while. I think we feel pretty comfortable with where we're at. There's just a few items to have some more information about, but I think we're in good shape.
Sure. Thank you.
So on the 26th, we'll have this public hearing. For the last item, we were thinking we might take action that night. Would we be interested in setting the table in case we're happy that we take action on the 26th, or you want to leave it on the 9th?
So I think Chris is bringing back a lot of information.
I don't think I'd want to vote on the
Okay, I just wanted to put that out there. I had that thought earlier before we had all this discussion. So, okay, Mr. Lawson, thank you so much.
Thank you all. Good night.
Okay, we are running a bit behind schedule, but I'll race through upcoming events and citizen involvement opportunities, which is item 12. Every Saturday morning, we have the Western Wake Farmers Market from 8 till noon. The Town of Morrisville Temporary Disc Golf Course is open at Cedar Fork District Park and Aviation Parkway. Morrisville Chamber has a number of great events coming up on Thursday, July 14th, just in 2 days, a C-suite conversation regarding cybersecurity at Wake Tech, and on Wednesday, July 20th, the annual First Responder Thank You Lunch. Please visit www.morrisvillechamber.org to register or for sponsorship opportunities. Our Summer in the Park music series continues. Big Chief will play at the Healthy Food Hub, 280 Town Hall Drive on July 22nd at 6:30. July 27th, we're having our fire station groundbreaking at 10 a.m. Morrisville residents are invited to take part in National S'mores Day in S'moresville. We're going to change the town's name on Wednesday, August 10th, so that's just a little bit of a save the date. For a full listing of our events, please see the town calendar at www.townofmorrisville.org. This time we can do council and manager comments. We'll begin with Councilmember Rabati, followed by Councilmember Fender, please.
I don't have anything tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Fender, followed by Councilmember Rao.
Fine, sure. I just want to thank Mr. Williams and Mr. Chris Haggerty and coming by tonight. Chris Haggerty has done a lot for the town of Morrisville and really supported us in our efforts of reassignment plans, having the Parkside Elementary and Parkside Middle School, and then now our 2 high schools as well. I know it's not just Chris Haggerty that, but he has been supportive of us and listened to the residents of Morrisville. So I really appreciate him coming by tonight. That's it.
Wonderful. Councilmember Rao, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, please.
Yeah, completely in agreement on Chris Haggerty, and he's done a remarkable job, and the other board members as well. A couple of announcements. I just want to remind everyone, July 26th is the primary, and in Morrisville, you can vote for the Wake County Sheriff in Morrisville, which is Joe Baker and Willie Rowe. So just make sure you can go to Herb Young Community Center to early vote. That's the closest to Morrisville. And you can even drop your absentee ballot off there to get it done. But we're trying to get more people to vote. Carrie's also got elections on the ballot. Great Family Fest on July 3rd. Was really great to be there. I want to thank, I attended with Councilmember Garamella the I Stand for Peace event with Sri Ravi Shankar. That was great. And the mayor and I were at the Tata Durham Rescue Mission. So that was excellent. And we also attended the Nepal, and the Durham Rescue Mission, they served food and volunteers there. It was just a great way to celebrate July 4th as an immigrant community, giving back to their home, the U.S., and the Nepali NRN convention that the mayor and I were at the convention center, where we welcomed the Nepalese community from around the state and the country. My last announcement is just something I wanted to share with the public. Last council meeting, I got home at about 10:45 at night, and my key fob wasn't working, so I must have forgotten to lock my door. And the next morning, when I got up to get something from my car, my entire car had been like broken into, and there was like stuff all over my car. So I was like shocked. And fortunately, I put my wallet in the car. And of course, the next place I went was my trunk, because I was afraid my tennis rackets would be gone, but they were in there. But I called the officer, the police department, and I just want to thank Officer Victor Phillip who came and made me feel better. And apparently it happened to about 4 other cars in our neighborhood. So just for the public, just be really careful. The lesson I learned, it was the one time I was really tired that night. I forgot to lock my door. Somebody went in there. They didn't take anything, but they ransacked through my whole car. So it was just really stressful to start your day. And they're just, just keep your alarms on, your car alarms on, lock your door, just keep your eyes open for anything out there. And this is a common occurrence we're seeing. Our police department's telling us that it's happening across Morrisville. So anyway, just didn't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but for me, it was just a real eye opener. And so I just want the public to be really careful out there in your neighborhoods to be safe. Keep your eyes open and make sure you lock your door and you have your alarm systems on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, followed by Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
So just 2 things. I just want to congratulate all those phenomenal educators that we recognized earlier tonight. And I want to say thank you to all the educators, Wake County Public School System educators and staff, for all they do for our children, educating them and keeping them healthy and safe day in and day out. So I want to congratulate all of them. And then the other thing I just want to say to our staff, thank you for putting on a fabulous July 3rd event. I know it's been a number of years since we've had fireworks, and I appreciate everyone's effort on July 3rd when it was really hot out here. But the fireworks were phenomenal, so thank you for that.
Councilmember Scroggins Johnson, please.
Yes, I'd like to also echo July 3rd was a great event. We didn't have our breakfast like we have had in years past, but there was a lot for everyone to do, and the fireworks new location is going to be really well received in the years to come with our new downtown. There will be a lot of fun to be had there, and that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to just share that I enjoyed some great, exciting cricket over the 4th of July weekend, including a last ball win for the Morrisville Raptors against New Jersey. Best wishes for a successful season to that team. I want to echo what I've heard from a number of council members. Thank you to our staff, entertainers, vendors, and countless volunteers who helped our 3rd of July family celebration be such a success. Morrisville really shines when the members of its diverse community come together in gatherings like that, and I look forward to many more of those in the future. I'd like to recognize Town Manager Page in case there's any comments from staff at this time. Yes, sir. Okay. Well, we have pretty much done the bulk of our work for the evening. We have 2 closed sessions coming up. So one is to discuss matters relating to economic development, and the other is a personnel matter. At this time, I'd ask for a motion to enter into closed session.
Mayor and Council, I'm going to move us into closed session pursuant to 143.31 11A4 and A6. I move that we go into closed session to discuss an economic development matter and a personnel matter.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. It is 9 p.m. We are now in closed session. If we can clear the room of non-necessary personnel.